Morning, Ridge Point. I'm going to have you guys stay up for just a minute if you would. I went back to the booth and asked if they'd put some of the lyrics of that song back up. I'd love just to give some attention to for a minute. Is that line that we just sang, filled with wonder, awestruck wonder at what? Just the mention of your name. When was the last time you felt that over just the name, Jesus? That just his name brought a sense of wonder or comfort or awe. Like that it wasn't just Jesus. It just rolled off your lips, casual and familiar, but it actually stopped you and it created a sense of awe and worship just in his name. We get way too familiar with things that we should never get familiar with about God. His nature, his character, his being, his greatness. And I think one of the reasons that God is, I believe, going to do some things in us as a result of this series is by going back to this whole thing we're calling rooted. It's us really saying, God, we want to get caught back up again with some of the wonder of what it is that we believe, of some of the early roots even that could be very easily dismissed. I find that in a series like this with Rooted, you can have one of two reactions. You can either think, well, I don't know any of this, so this is great. I'm learning and I'm absorbing. I'm brand new to the journey of faith. Or you could be kind of over here on the other side of the spectrum, and maybe you're going, man, I've been doing this for decades. I've been walking with Jesus for a long time. This is just the quote-unquote basics. We're going back to the basics a little bit, and you could lose a little bit of the wonder of even the basics that should never become basic for us because they are the foundations. They are the roots of what we believe and why they're so significant for us. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a verse really quick before I do have you sit down. In the book of Colossians, Paul writes this, so then, just as you received Christ, that phrase is important, just as you received, he says, continue to live your lives in him. He goes, so just as you once received, so when you first learned about these roots, when you first learned about the basics, when you first learned about the fundamentals, he says that wasn't a one and done thing. Continue in them. Continue to grow in them, to learn in them, to be struck by them. He said, so that you would be rooted and built up in him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught and overflowing with thankfulness. You know this as well as I do. But the depths of the roots of a tree produce the strength that goes above ground. And the same is true for you and I. Years ago, I had a really weird example that I learned at the cost of about $15,000. I learned this reality. When we have a giant silver maple that was growing next to our house and destroyed our plumbing, destroyed our driveway. And at one point, the roots were literally shoving up thousands of pounds of cement inches above the slab. There's just one root that was pushing the slabs up above the garage. My wife, when she would back out of the garage, she had to gun it and jump the slab. It got so high. Here's another picture, even in the daylight, a little bit better. This is what we have the potential to be. Is a tree planted with roots so deep and so powerful that the tree above ground, that's you and I. That's how we live. That's what comes against us. That's the winds that blow. Nothing can shake us because of the roots that go down. And some of you already know this, but that $15,000 taught me that for a number of trees, there is the potential for the root system to be 2 to 3 times in length the height of the tree. And I think, again, the same is true for you and I. And that's why this series, I really think, is more than just important. I think it's a series that God has, if you're open to him doing it, he has the potential to do some really incredible work in our lives. Not taking us back to the basics, but reminding us that there is no basics. That everything about who God is, from things you learned 50 years ago to maybe learning right now, should never lose their potency and create within us a sense of wonder so that even just his name would draw worship from us. Go ahead and have a seat and let me pray. Jesus, we are thankful to be in your presence. We are thankful, and just for the chance to do this today. Thankful that even though it's another frigid day, that the sun is out and shining. Thankful to be sitting here among friends and family. Thankful that for some people maybe that just wandered in today for the first time, that don't yet have friends and family here, they don't realize that there's a whole army of friends and family that they will soon have here. For those even watching online, maybe there's some watching online, God, right now that don't feel yet like they could walk in the building of a church, and this is their toe in the water moment. And God, I'm thankful that whether in this room or online or wherever it is that we're watching even today or days or weeks later, that God, your voice will transcend all of that time and space and place and speak. And so God, would you give to us the ability, with ears beyond physical, with minds beyond physical, with hearts beyond physical, to in a supernatural way to receive from you your presence, your words, your counsel, your care. To your glory, to our benefit, Jesus, we would pray. And God, also, because our hearts have resolved to the fact that the Lions won't be in the Super Bowl next week, we say, let it be. But if you would be so good as to stomp the Seahawks and not allow them to win, we would say thank you. Amen. All right. God cares about those things too, you guys. He really does. He does. He just has the advantage of knowing that the Seahawks are going to lose already, where we have to wait and see. So, by the way, Kevin is going to be here next week. Kevin Pike, was in the position I have here at Ridgepoint, if you're newer to Ridgepoint, before I showed up. And he is a major, major, major Seahawks fan. I assume next week he's going to show up in some Seahawks garb. So here's my ask. If you have any care and affection for me, come next week in every bit of Lions gear that you own and make it clear to Kevin on the Seahawks. So even if you're a Seahawks fan, it's okay. Well, Jesus' grace covers you too. But just next week, bring your Lions gear fan anyways, and let's let Kevin know that we're not behind him with the Seahawks. So, all right. So this morning, it is. I was telling first service, I'll tell you too. It is not lost on me the task at hand today of all of this series, because for the 10 weeks we're going to be in this is week 2. We're going to spend a number of different weeks talking about things that God inquires of us, things that God expects of us. We're going to talk about things that God models for us. But today is unique, I think, of all the other weeks, because today what we're going to talk about, and if you're in Rooted with us and you're joining through the groups or the study, you know this because it's been what you've done all week long. We're going to talk about who is God. And the way that we've structured Rooted to go is that the groups and the study will be the content that will culminate on the weekends. So on the weekends, this is kind of hopefully the icing on the cake, the bow on the content. So all week long, it's been looking at who is God. And I think especially just sitting in that with my group and even in the study myself this week and getting ready to speak, there were just moments where I felt the overwhelming task of trying to talk as a human to a group of humans on behalf of God, saying, hey, everybody, this is who God is. And I think for multiple reasons, one of which is I'm still learning and growing too. And it's a weird task sometimes to communicate in general on behalf of God, let alone this is who God is. When I'm still trying to figure out in many ways, just like you, who he is, I'm growing in that, I'm learning that. And in addition to growing in it and learning it, frankly, there's some things I can't be right about. One of my favorite quotes of all time was by a theologian named Leonard Sweet, who once said, I'm sure that I'm wrong in about 20% of my theology. I just don't know what 20%. And I love the humility in that, to realize we can't possibly be right in everything we believe. And so I'm aware that there are some things that even though I'm like, this is what I think God is like, I can't be entirely right about everything. And so when I come into a week like this, where the task is, who is God? In answering who is God, it just feels like a weighty task. And I don't know why I'm sharing that with you other than just kind of tip of the hand behind my own thoughts. It is quite the task. And so all week long, I'm like, all right, God, how do we answer who you are in such a great question and such a great pursuit that, frankly, we'll spend the rest of our lives? The Bible says very clearly that on the day we see him face to face, then we will know fully, even as we're fully known. So you and I don't end this journey. There's no point between now and eternity where we go, oh, figured him out, got it. So this is a life's pursuit. So I want to go back to where it began. I'm going to go all the way back to the early pages of the Bible, the book of Exodus, where one of the places that although God had already revealed himself to humanity, he had revealed himself more in just the nature of being the all-powerful creator, or what he would have been known as the Elohim, which referred mostly just to the fact that there was a God, an all-powerful creator. But in the early book of Exodus, what God does is he moves the understanding and awareness of who he is to a much more personal description and present to us. Not just Elohim, that there is simply a God, but there is a present, personable God. So book of Exodus, if you've got your Bibles, we're going to be there most of the morning. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. And now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he had led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. And Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it didn't burn up. And so Moses thought, I'm going to go over and see what this strange sight is and why this bush doesn't burn up. And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses answered. Say it. How do you answer? Here I am. I forgot the offering, didn't I? You guys are awesome, and you're always on a ball. Thank you so much. So, probably too late to make a moment out of it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry. Let's keep going. So Moses calls out. Say it again. He says what? He says, here I am. All right. When we're looking at this text, what's interesting to me is that this is one of the first times, again, I'm going to say what I said a minute ago. God's not first time revealing himself. Creation is aware that there is a God, but this is the first time he reveals a personableness about him, a closeness to his creation and his humanity, an affection for them, an attentive ear to their cries, to their prayers. So this is where he's going to present something much more personal about who he is to us and who we are. But what's fascinating to me is he chooses to do it through one of the elements of nature that is frankly as frightening as it is drawing, like fire. He chooses to use fire. And you know what I mean? Like, if you've ever been around a campfire, you're just like caught in it. Like, you could just stare at it forever. But you also know you don't want to touch it because danger, Will Robinson. But it's also been fire throughout my life, probably many of yours as well, that at different moments has taught me some pretty valuable lessons. Like, I remember as a kid being told, no, Craig, you can't throw your little brother in the fire. You know, there's lessons you learn when you're growing up about fire. Or in 2015, when my son and I built a tree house, let me back up from 15. So my wife and I, when we moved into the house that we came from when we moved here to this side of the state a year ago, I'll never forget, first time we walked into this house, fell in love with the house, walked into the backyard, sealed the deal. There was this massive, I don't know how old it was. I was going to make up a number, but it's probably older than I'm thinking. So silver maple tree in the backyard. I'll never forget, we looked at it, and my kids right away, they go, that's a treehouse tree. I was like, yep. That is a treehouse tree of treehouse trees. I'm like, we're buying this house. We're building a treehouse in that tree. So we get in, and you know, you move in and you unpack. You get settled. You get into your routine. 1 year turns into 2 years, turns into a couple years. And then one day, my son's in the backyard. It's a Saturday, and he's playing with a buddy of his, Anthony. And he looks at that tree, and he goes, "Yeah, my dad said he was going to build a treehouse in that tree, but he probably never will." I was like, Oh, this is a therapy bill one day. I gotta fix this. So I'm like, we're building a treehouse today. And I go to my wife, I was like, I'm gonna go to Lowe's and I'm gonna buy all the wood I can. She says, you don't even have a plan. I'm like, I'm the plan. I'm like, I'll figure it out. So I wasn't speaking at church the next day, so I grabbed Tobin. I think we ended up Home Depot. It's almost closed. Buy all the lumber, get home. That weekend, we just set to it. And I had a bunch of buddies. They're like, hey, we'll come help. I'm like, nope, this is going to be a story for me and Tobin. We're doing this together. So we got the whole floor laid before winter came, which came a little early that year. That next spring, so now 2015 spring, we went back at it as soon as we could get outdoors, and we built the rest of it up. This is what we finished with right here on your screen. So we get that whole thing done, and it's, like I said, it's spring. So treehouse is up, we're excited, but I've delayed and put off some of the yearly spring cleaning that we would do because our whole yard was covered with all kinds of trees, mostly silver maples. We would get about 100 bags of leaves every year. So we had a lot of work to do. Some leaves left over from last year, sticks and twigs. So we had all the things to do. First time cutting the lawn. So I'm cutting the lawn. Everybody's throwing twigs in the fire pit. We've got everything burning. It's a good day. We're getting work done around the house. I run out of gas, run up to the gas station, fill up the tank, come back, gas in it, and burn. I get back to task. And I noticed at one point, I'm cutting the lawn, and my son, whose job it was to keep the fire going, keep feeding it with the twigs, keep feeding it with the sticks, had gotten distracted and squirreled off somewhere, and the fire's going out. I'm like, "Durr!" So I run over to the fire. I'm like, hey, get this fire going. Well, again, springtime, leaves are wet, so it's not lighting very easily. So I decide, I just bought gas. I'm going to go get the gas can. So I get the gas can, and I come over with that can, and I start to dump it, and just as I start pouring the gas, I notice there's a teeny little flame down at the bottom of the fire pit. I'm like, oh, this is not going to end good. And sure enough, I don't even think the gas had hit the pit yet. It was just the fumes from brand new gas. That flame went from that pit right up into the nozzle. So I'm holding this gas can, 5 gallons. The nozzle is completely engulfed in flames, and I panic, and I just start smacking it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm going to put it out by I'm trying to knock the flame off. And luckily, I was smart enough at one point to think, this is going to blow up in my face. I should probably get rid of this. And so I chucked the gas can, and I am not lying. The minute it hit the ground, it blew up. and it just turned into this 10-foot ring of fire in my yard, and guess where it was? Directly under that treehouse. It was like a foot or two away from the front of the whole thing. I'm like, are you kidding me? And within an instant, that whole can melted down into a bowl that just was a bowl of gas on fire, and then all the ring of gas. So I'm thinking, what in the world am I gonna do? So I'm panicking. My son looks over, and he just starts running around the yard. He's like, ah, ah. I'm like, not helpful, dude. Just sit down, do something other than yell and scream, but don't get your mom. And so he's like, Mom. I'm like, shut up, dude, don't get mom. So I run over and grab the hose. I bring the hose back. Remember, springtime, I hadn't turned it on inside yet, so I squeeze, no water. I'm like, oh. Nicole comes to the door. She's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. At this point, I've got a shovel, and I'm digging up dirt, throwing dirt at it, trying to put it out with dirt. But there was so much gas in the bowl that it melted down that all I'm doing is shoving gas out of the bowl every time the dirt hits it and creating a bigger ring of fire. And I'm not lying. It's 20 feet high at this point. So I'm like, this is not working. So she says, I'll get the fire extinguisher. I'm like, good idea. So she comes out. She tosses me a fire extinguisher. I run over. I pull the pin. Nothing. It's like 20 years expired. I'm like, duh. So my neighbor Fred, my elderly neighbor Fred, is watching all of this take place. He hobbles over to his hose, and he's coming back, and I'm thinking he's going to just like hand the hose. No, he starts climbing the fence. It's a chain link fence. He gets his leg over, and he slips. Boom. Not kidding. And Fred's like, oh, and then he falls off the fence. And he's on the ground, and I'm looking at him thinking, oh my gosh, Fred's gonna die. So I run over there. I'm like, nope, he's alive. Thanks for the hose, Fred. So I go back with his hose. I'm hitting it with the water. All the water does is what the dirt did. And so Nicole comes back out. She's like, what do you want me to do? I'm like, I don't know. Google how to put out a gas fire. She's like, should I call the fire department? I'm like, do not call the fire department. No, just Google it. Just Google it. I start yelling, Google it. So she goes back inside to Google how to put out a gas fire. In the meantime, I hear the fire truck. I'm like, she called the fire department. Nope, Fred's wife did. Thankfully, Fred's wife was like, this guy's an idiot and he's gonna burn down the neighborhood. She calls the fire. So the fire department pulls up, full truck. 3 guys get out, all the gear, with the hose off the truck, come running to the back gate, and he stops and goes, oh. And then goes back to the truck with the hose and comes back with a fire extinguisher. That was literally all it took. Done, out, gone. And I'm humiliated, and I look at the guy and I go, I mean, this guy happen all the time, right? He goes, nah, more than you would think. You're the first this year. I was like, and then as he walks out of my yard, he goes, by the way, you're not supposed to have an open fire pit. And then he leaves. And the thing was, I wasn't supposed to have that treehouse either. I chose not to get permits for that either. So I'm thinking, this has got us so bad. So that's my story, and here's why I tell you my story. Because not only did I learn very valuable things from that story, like I will never use gas to start a fire again, I also know that that story reinforced for me a moment that I've had many times over in my life. And maybe for you, it hasn't been gas, but it's been something else, and you've had similar moments. Where I walked away when it was all said and done, and I realized I could have not only burnt down that treehouse, I could have killed my son. He was out there with me. And I'm just taking in the scope of everything that just happened, and here was the thought: I am such an idiot. Like, what is my problem? And I have these moments throughout my life, just like you, that just tend to reinforce an image and an identity in me that's more of a, you can't figure it out, you can't fix it. What the heck is your problem? Why did you do that? And here's what I think is so interesting when we go back to the story of Moses. Not only is it in the flames and the fire that God decides will be the method in which he reveals himself in a whole new level and way to humanity, but it is in that very same fire, in that very same revelation of himself, at that very same moment, that not only does he reveal who he is, he begins to recreate the identity of an 80-year-old man named Moses, who at that point in his life had concluded that he would never be anything more than a mistake he made some 40 years earlier. And yet God will use this moment and these flames and the revelation of himself to begin to reframe who Moses understands himself to be. So I want to look at that a little bit, the dialogue, especially between God and Moses, but I want to go back, and I know a number of you will be aware of it, but to the moment that Moses made this mistake at 40 years old. It's in the 2nd chapter of the same book we're in, Exodus, verse 11. And then one day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his people where they were working, and he watched them in their hard labor. And he saw an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And looking this way and looking that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. For years, I used to think that this was merely just a crime of passion. Moses goes out, he sees the abuse of the Egyptian, he snaps, he kills him, he buries him, and he's like, what did I do? But later on, centuries later on, in the book of Acts, we get a little bit more behind the scenes of some of what Moses was actually thinking in all of this process. The book of Acts chapter 7 tells us this. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. Matter of fact, here's what happens. The next day, Moses comes upon two Israelites who are fighting. And he tries to reconcile them by saying, men, you're brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other? But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, who made you to be ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian. So this is where he's at now, where he gets married, he settles down, and he begins to tend sheep, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. So 40 years earlier, Moses makes this mistake. And the only thing worse than making a mistake and screwing everything up is doing it when you actually think you're doing the right thing, trying to help, and it ends up being the wrong thing. And the only one that can fix those moments, I think, can fix any warped, misframed idea of who we are, let alone the deeply embedded ones and broken ones and painful ones, is the God who made us, who knows who we are intended to begin with. And so I want to go back to the text where we left off with Moses at the burning bush. So God says, Moses, Moses. Moses answered, here I am. Verse 5. Do not come any closer, God said, and take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And at this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. And so I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land and into a good land, a spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. It's the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivitites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I? Look at somebody next to you and just say, who am I? He says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? It's a pretty fair question. And when you consider a couple realities of this moment, number one, he's having a conversation with God. There's God, there's Moses, there's you, me. And I mean, this is definitely a moment where he's like, God, do you know who you're talking to? Like, you're God, I tend sheep for a living. I've been doing it for 40 years. That's all I know. I know sheep, not combat, not war, not toe-to-toe with Pharaoh. So for one, I mean, the question's fair because he's talking to God. There's a little bit of an intimidation factor. But then you also consider the fact that what God's asking him essentially to do is to go back to the very place that 40 years earlier he made his greatest mistake. We usually run from those places. We hide from those places. We don't want to face those places. And God says, you haven't been there for 40 years, man. I'm going to send you back to the very place you made your greatest mistake. And then in sending him back, it's not just to go back and relive the mistake. He's actually telling him, I want you to go back and pick a fight with the most powerful empire of the day. So it makes sense that Moses' response would be, who am I to go back and do this? And I think in this moment, and in the next couple of interactions between God and Moses, the Bible will introduce two of the most important questions in all of humanity, that whether you intentionally wrestle with them or unintentionally, all of us will, one degree or another, give answer to these questions. And the first one Moses just asked, who am I? And it doesn't matter how you fill that out. Like, who am I that I should, or that I don't have, or that I do, or that was done to me? All of that's secondary. Who am I is one of the greatest questions of humanity that all of us are in pursuit to understand. And it explains so many of the decisions we make to try and create our identity, our personality, where we live, what we do, what we want others to see about ourselves, to not see about ourselves, the counseling we do, our exploration of faith and religion. Like, so much of what we do in life is ultimately an attempt to answer that question. Who am I? Like, what am I even here for? What is the nature of me as a person? Who am I is a fundamental question that we have to figure out, not just how to ask, but where to go for the answer. And so much of the brokenness in life and in many of our lives is that we have gone to all the wrong places to try to answer that question. But this is also where we'll find the second question, which is equally, if not more so, the most important question that we need to ask. Go back to the text. Moses says, "Who am I that I should go back to the Egyptians?" And God says, "I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Now, the next question is about to follow in the next verse, but before we get there, here's what's interesting. To Moses' question of both identity and insecurity, who am I and who am I? God, you know who I am, right? I mean, I'm a shepherd, I'm a murderer, I fled for my life. So this is a question as much of insecurity as identity. He says, who am I? It's interesting to me that God does not respond back with description. He responds back with presence. In other words, God doesn't say, well, okay, I understand, Moses. Let me tell you who you are. Listen, you're a guy that had an unfair shake. All the babies were murdered at the time you were born, and you had to be hit. So I get, and you had grown up in the, Pharaoh's, and then you trained by him, but you're really a Hebrew. And he doesn't recount to Moses with affirmation his past that makes sense of his present. He doesn't say to him, he doesn't bolster up his ego. He's like, Moses, you the man. I'm God, and I picked you. You're my A-team. Come on, you got this, Moses. He doesn't do that. He doesn't remind him of his heritage. Moses, let me tell you who you are beyond even yourself. You're a part of this incredible nation of people, the Hebrews. They've been waiting actually for God to show up and rescue in this moment as he once promised. Like you'll become the fulfillment of a long-awaited promise and the anticipation of it. And even more so, you are part of then a nation of people that will produce the Messiah for all mankind. He doesn't do any of that. He has all kinds of things that God could have said, well, oh man, I'm sorry you feel bad about it. Let me tell you who you are. What he says is, oh, you don't know who you are? Here's how I'll answer that. I'll be with you. Which is fascinating to me because here's what it begins to tell us in the earliest pages of the Bible. If you want to know who you are, you cannot divorce that question and its answer from first knowing who God is. They are intimately and inseparably connected to one another. Knowing who we are is connected to who God is. It is the product of exploring, living in, and pursuing deeper and ever-deepening increase of who he is and his presence in our lives. You can't pull them apart. That's why even for those of you in the room, if you're a parent right now, this is your number one job as a parent. Especially right now, because your kids, I remember my kids when they were younger and they were still living at home, we're forming. More than ever at this point, we're forming who we believe we are. We're forming our identity. And as a parent, some of you've got concern. You see the influence of school or social media or media in general, and you're like, oh, all these sources, and they're trying to influence my kids. And so you try to do all the right things and how you reinforce good characteristics in them, how you elevate the things you want repeated. And I'm not saying any of that's bad, but beside of all of that, do you realize your number one job is to lead them to the presence of Jesus, who will tell them who they are? They'll never discover who they are apart from first and foremost learning in increasing measure who he is, because those two are so tied. And even for some of us, okay, let's move beyond kids. How about some of us just sitting in the room right now? For some of you right now, some of the greatest pain even presently in your life is because you keep running to other places than the God who made you to understand who you even are, your worth, your value, your purpose, what it is you have to present to the world. And all the while, God's going, you want to know who you are? Here's how I'll answer. Me. It's in my presence. You'll begin to discover who you are. And so God says, I'm not going to answer with description, but I'll answer with presence. And then Moses comes back to him again, and he says, well, okay, but suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your father, he sent me to you. And they ask, well, what's his name? What am I then to tell them? One of the things I love about Moses is he's every bit the knucklehead that you and I are. Truthfully. Because you could read this and you could go, Moses, you're talking to God. Just shut your mouth and do what you're told. Like, how dumb do you have to be? And then I think of my own life. I'm like, oh, I got plenty of Moses moments where I ignore things that I know God would want from me, where I blow off things that I think God is impressing on me, where I want to negotiate on things that I don't like that he expects of me. Like, we do the same thing. And this is what Moses is doing. He's like, well, I don't know, God, and maybe, and what do I say, and who do I tell them? And so here's Moses struggling, as we all do, trying to answer really two of the most important questions in all of life that now have been presented in these early chapters. Number one, who am I? And number two, who is God? When he says, who do I tell them simply? What's your name? He's asking, who are you? Here's the problem with those two questions, even though they're fundamental, is that we usually try to answer them in that order. Who am I? Who is God? And the problem is when you try to answer them in that order, it's not just the wrong order. You will end up with the wrong answer. You will end up with something shy and short of who you are supposed to be and who God actually is. And here's why. Because God defines who we are, not the opposite way around. And so what we have to do in life is have the greatest pursuit be who is God. In ever-increasing measure wanting to know. That's not a one-time answer. That's not a one-time pursuit. Until the day that you and I die and see him face to face and know him fully, we're going to continue to have layer after layer after layer peeled back on who he is. And if our number one pursuit in life is not, I want to know who he is, then we will end up pursuing who we are, and then if it's pursuit of who we are, we will end up with a warped version of who he is and who we are, because he decides who we are. He defines who we are. That's why A.W. Tozer once said this on your screen, one of my favorite quotes. He said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Why? Because what comes into our mind when we think about God doesn't just help us better understand who he is. The better we understand who he is ultimately helps us better understand who we are. You can't separate them. Not if God is who he says he is. The maker, the creator, the one who intimately, personally, and with mission and purpose knit you together in your mother's womb. You weren't an accident. You didn't surprise him. He wasn't one day like, oh, I didn't know they were making you. Like, he was intimately involved in that whole process. He dreamed you into existence. If all of that's true, then your identity cannot be understood, let alone formed, apart from first pursuing him, who his identity is, what his forming is, and who he as God is. And the more you pursue that, the more he begins to unveil to you who you are and what you've been made for. And so Moses asks a very direct, poignant question. What's your name? And God gives a very direct and poignant answer. And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And this is what you're to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. And God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. And this will be my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. So go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob appeared to me and said, I have watched over you, and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivitites, the Jebusites, and it will be a land that is flowing with milk and honey. So when God responds to him and gives him a name, he says, here's my name. I am that I am. It's a Hebrew phrase, and that phrase is Ahyeh, Ashir, Ahyeh. And what's unique about that is it's very different than how they would have understood him so far, which would have just been the name for God, Elohim. But again, that just would have referenced the fact that there is an all-powerful being who created all things. What I am that I am does is it personalizes him. That it's not just simply a God who's distant and all-powerful. No. Now he's up close in your life, present, affectionate, cares for you, and personal. He is a God who is not just the power of all creation. He's a God who's giving you a name by which to call him, who's giving you a promise of his presence that you can lean into, and who's giving you the certainty that he can redeem your past no matter the brokenness. He can establish your present, and he can launch you into your future, which is the identity he made you for. And we see this happen with Moses. Is that God comes to him and begins to recreate his identity, but that recreation of Moses' identity as he sends him back to be the liberator of Egypt is formed out of God's identity. He doesn't have that identity as Egypt's liberator until he first has more revelation of who God is, and then God sends him to do that. And this is the dance with understanding God. mean, I would actually say it this way. In the pursuit of this whole last week, who is God? Part of what this passage would say to us is, he is the God who is above us as creator and yet is with us as personal companion. And because he's with us as personal companion, what he does is reveals ongoingly more and more of who he is so that we then can respond to what he reveals about himself. He responds and reveals, and then we move in action towards what we've learned about him. And you see it with Moses. Like right off the bat, Moses sees God's revelation in the burning bush. So he sees this bush, it's all consumed. What's God revealing about himself in that? He's revealing that he's powerful, that he exists, that he's over nature, that he's not confined by the laws of physics. Like he's revealing things about himself. What was Moses' response to that revelation? He went and checked it out. You go, well, yeah, duh. You see a bush and it's not burning, you go. But that's the dance. That is the relationship of revelation and response. Whatever God reveals, you have an appropriate response to it. So God revealed himself in this weird moment that didn't make sense. So Moses responded. He could have ignored it, but his response was, I'm going to go check it out. And then he gets there, and God's revelation is he calls Moses by name. He says, Moses, Moses. So what's he revealing? He's revealing that I know you. I'm not unaware of you. I'm not distant from you. I'm not an impersonal God. I know you. I actually know your name. And Moses' response back to that was, here I am. I mean, again, he could have gone, the bush just called my name, going back home. Right? But he responded. He's like, doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm going to answer. Here I am. And then God reveals again. He says, the place you're standing is holy ground. What's the revelation of God? What's being revealed about God in this moment? That he is the of all. Like he is the Alpha, the Omega, above all, before all, after all. Because whatever he touches, he says, turns holy and sacred. Like he's not saying, I'm a God. He's saying, I'm the God. And what was Moses' response? God's revelation, Moses' response, take off my sandals. And then he says, I'm sending you back to Egypt to free my people. Again, God's making a revelation. He's revealing something about himself. He's revealing that he hears, he listens, that he has empathy and compassion for our cries, for our pain, that our prayers don't fall on deaf ears. He's revealing something about his nature, his character, his affection for his creation. And Moses responded to that. Moses' response was eventually to go. And he had a litany of excuses along the way. His insecurity constantly slipped out, and God had to remind him, but I'm with you, but I'm with you, but I'm with you. And he would reform his insecurities, and there was this relationship back and forth of Moses constantly bringing to God, but I am not, and God reminding him, but I am. Yeah, but I am not, but I am. But in this moment, what God does is he presents to Moses these continued kind of peeling back of the layers, revealing more and more who he is. And every time he does, Moses had the opportunity to respond deeper and deeper. And as he did, as a product of his ongoing response to what God revealed, it formed Moses' identity, it formed his purpose, and it sent him into the very thing that God had for him in store for his life. This is why it's so critical that for you and I, as we pursue knowing who God is, that we don't ever consider that that's an easy question to answer or a one and done time. Well, God is Jesus. Yes, good. Starting point is that we constantly are in pursuit of understanding who he is and the pursuit of who he truly is. Because there's a lot of voices around us. Our own resistance to things we don't like about God, other authors, other pastors, other preachers, a lot of voices around us that would reshape God into some distorted version or counterfeit version of himself. And for some of us, there's possibly 20% of the things we believe about God that are wrong, that we have clung to things, even been affectionate about certain parts of who God is that in fact aren't who he is. Or maybe for some it's 30% or 40 or 80 or 90. There are people I know right now with all great intentions that believe they're following God, and the God they describe is not this God. And so we have to be intent in our pursuit of knowing who God is to make sure that our pursuit is to know who he actually is, not who our preferred version of him may be. Because I will tell you what many of you have already experienced as well. So many times as God reveals more and more throughout my life of who he is, there are moments that he's not the God I wanted him to be. He's always the God I needed him to be. Not always the God I wanted him to be. There's a song I've been listening to recently that's really reinforced this. So this maybe be a little bit of a weird moment as an analogy here, but I'm going to play a clip of a song that's been really reinforcing this point to me, that we have to be determined not just to know who God is, but to know who the true God is among all the distorted versions of him around us. So just for a minute, it's a new artist named Solomon Ray that I discovered recently. Maybe you've already heard of him, but listen to this song and see if you don't get the point.
Lord, I'm tired from all this stressing, too weak to count my blessings. Ain't got time for window dressing, just trying to keep my soul intact. I've been running hard, feet on fire, dreams and duty.
Come on, that's hot. That's good, isn't it? You like him? Maybe some of you are like, I don't get how the lyrics really reinforce what you're trying to say, though, about pursue who God really is. It's not the lyrics, it's the author. Because he's not real. That's 100% AI. I got so excited a couple weeks ago. I came in on a Sunday morning. I was like, I got to show Moses and Jerry this song. So I'm like, Jeremy, come here. I was like, listen, I pull out my phone. I was like, I found this new guy. I start playing it. He starts laughing. I was like, I know. I'm probably late to the party. You already know about him. He's like, no, he's not real. I go, what do you mean he's not real? He's like, that's AI, dude. He goes, everybody knows that. I'm like, oh, no. So then I pull up his page. I go, he's got a picture. He's got a face. He's like, yeah, it's fake, dude. He's not real. I'm like, that's not possible. So my wife, at one point, she worked in some of the AI projects at Ford. So I sent it to her. I was like, babe, is this real? She's like, no, honey, it's AI. It's not real at all. I'm like, what? I've totally been jamming on this guy. I love this guy. Like, I got emotional on the way to church for one of his songs where he's talking about trusting Jesus. I was like, it's AI? He's like, yeah, it's AI. It's totally fake. And we could do the same thing with God. There's the ability that we have to fall in love with parts of God that aren't actually who he is. So if you want to know who God is, maybe this seems obvious, but you have to allow God himself to define himself. And he does that all throughout this book. The problem is we challenge it constantly. There's a lot of things that we don't like about how God describes himself. And so we push back on things like, well, I don't like that God does, or I don't like that God did, or if God really loved us, he wouldn't allow, or I don't like that the Bible says that God wants. Fill in the blank on all of it. And what we're doing at that point is we're saying, I would prefer a more AI version of God, one that I get to create. Because the reality is, one of the first things that God tells us about our identity is what we have captured in the theological idea or construct called the imago Dei, meaning that we are made in God's image. But what we tend to do when we start picking apart who God is because of the things we don't like is we reverse the script and we do more of I would call it the imago man, where we try to make God into our image. And yet, if you want to truly know who God is, you have to resist every temptation to tell God who he is instead of let him tell you who he is. God himself has to define himself. Even the parts that as he reveals to you, you go, ouch, I don't know if I like that part. Because what will happen is we'll start to kind of group ourselves into subcategories, subcultures, and we'll let those subcategories and cultures of people, things, places, hobbies, pursuits create our identity for us, and then we project that identity onto God, and we go, well, that's what God is like. For example, the other side of the state where I come from, over in the Detroit area, I would say in the Detroit area, there's kind of the persona that people love to be seen as gritty and tough, and honestly, even intimidating. Like, there's just something about the Detroit area, like, people just love to be seen as kind of intimidating. That's why no matter who you meet in this kind of the Metro Detroit area, no matter where they live, they'll tell you Detroit. People say it all the time, like, Detroit, you live in Birmingham. Like, you live in bougie Birmingham. You don't live in Detroit. But it's like we love this idea that Detroit's a little bit intimidating, a little bit gritty. So we have these subcultures that we move to, and we let them define who we are. We do it here, too. On the west side of Michigan, in the Holland area, it'd probably be hardworking, successful, Dutch, right? I remember early on when I got here, I had somebody try to explain to me Dutch bingo. And at one point, they're like, well, and then I'm related to this person related to this person, this to that person. This is what we call Dutch bingo. And I looked at him, I said, man, I don't feel like I should move here because I'm not Dutch and I have no Dutch family. And he looks at me straight face and he says, oh, trust me, somewhere in your family there's Dutch. I was like, oh. And so joking, I look back and I go, you probably think God's Dutch. Again, straight face. And he goes, God is Dutch. I was like, oh, okay. But we have these subcultures where we absorb the identities around us and we try to frame ourselves on the people and the places around us. Go a little south of us. Go to Saugatuck. We try to frame ourselves in the identity of our sexuality. And then it's also the things that we do or we have or we don't have. And so our I am defining qualities become I am what I do, I am what I have, I am where I live, I am my 401k, I am what my kids do, I am where my kids went to school, I am what my kids' ranking and rating is in their soccer team, I am my ethnic background, and you get the idea, we just fill in the blank. I am the mistakes that I've made, I am what's been done to me. And we start to form our identities around all the wrong things, and here's why that's a problem. Because when you form your identity around anything other than God, you will take that identity in your pursuit of God and you will project it to Him. And you won't then live your life to say, I am who He is. You will live your life robbing Him of His first announcement in this book. I am that I am. I am what I am. I decide what I am. And then you will conclude, and He is like I am. And I would just tell you, if God looks just like you, thinks just like you, acts just like you, responds just like you, you're like, man, God's just like me. You're probably worshiping an AI version. And not the one true God who you have allowed to define Himself, of Himself. If you follow Jesus the rest of your life, it will be an ongoing pursuit of asking Him, who are you, who are you, who are you, and Him pulling back layer after layer after layer to reveal more. And when He does, our job is one thing, to respond, just like Moses. To whatever it is He reveals, there is a response required. Give the response. Do what He says. That's as simple as it is. As you pursue Him, He will tell you more of who He is, and when He does, it will be accompanied with something He instructs you to do. Do it. That's it. You receive who it is He tells you He is. Whether you get it, whether you like it, whether it makes sense in that moment or not, you receive it and go, you are who you are. You get to define who you are, not me. I receive it and I will respond to it appropriately. And as you do, here's the crazy thing. He doesn't just keep unveiling more and more who you are, but who He is. And as He reveals more who He is, He reveals more who you are. If you try and pursue who you are apart from Him, you will end up with, at best, an AI version of yourself. But when you pursue Him first and foremost, it flips and changes everything. Here's what begins to happen. Suddenly your I am what I do becomes He's what I do. Suddenly your I am what I own becomes He's what I own. I am my past mistakes becomes no, He's my forgiveness. Past, present, future for the things I haven't even done yet. I am who I sleep with becomes no. He's my deepest experience of love and even pleasure. I am who my kids are becomes He's my truest family. I am my ethnic culture becomes He's my defining community and culture. I am where I live becomes He is my home. I am my past mistakes and regrets and insecurities becomes He is my liberation. He is my forgiveness. He is my identity. He is my future. In a world that is addicted to defining ourselves, figuring out who we are, and projecting it to the world through social media, through our posturing, through our performance, through our jobs, through our acquisitions, through our stuff, through our neighborhood we live in, through all of it. The truth is, your identity, true identity, is anchored in Jesus, the one who is both above us and who is with us, who is the constant and unchanging, who is the God of creation and yet the intimate by your side companion. And you and I don't have to exhaust ourselves trying to figure out who we are. We just have to pursue Him, and He'll tell us, and He'll show us. So God, I pray that as we go into our week, you would give us some new and deeper revelation of you. Because all of us are in different places, God, and you know it, and you know where we're at. And so would you give to us what is the needed and appropriate revelation of who you are, and then the courage, even in the mystery of that revelation, to respond to you. To say, okay, this is who you are, this is what you're asking, this is what I do. And find not just that we learn more and more to know you and who you are, but come to actually discover who we are and who you've made us to be. In Jesus' name, amen.
want to know you for who you really are. I want to know you. I want to know you. I want to know you for who you really are. That I want to know. 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 I want to know for who you really are. For who you really are. I want to know you. I want to know. I want to know you. I want to know. I want to know you. I want to know you. For who you really are. For who you really are. I want to know you. I want
guys are incredible. Thank you. A habit I'll tell you about really quick as we walk out. Years ago, for too long, I used to leave mornings like this. And especially because I've told you this, it's true. I'm super introverted for the most part. This is only God that would put me up in front of people on a stage. I was petrified to speak as a kid. And anyway, so a lot of things about me that when I get off the stage lend me to feel very exposed and just exhausted. And so I would go immediately leaving the service. For years, I did this a while ago, and I'd pull out my phone, I'd pull up Facebook, and I'd right away try to look and see what anybody said. What were the comments? What were the thoughts? And I would live and die by them. I'd rise and fall. I do what a friend of mine calls value farming, where I was just out there farming whatever value of myself I could get from what other people thought. And there was a clear point where I knew God said, you are trying to form who you are and who you're not in all the wrong place, man. You get up here and speak about me, and then you go wonder what everybody else thinks about you. And so it's one of the reasons why not only did I get it off my phone, but I created a new habit, and I'll do it today before I go home. Before I get out of my truck, before I get into the driveway at my house, I'll spend a couple minutes just celebrating Jesus and thanking him for his goodness in my life. Not even asking him, God, what did I do today? Did I do what you wanted me to? What did you think of me? Because even that's the wrong question, because that's me trying to figure out my identity before his identity. And the more I have gotten in the habit of just sitting there saying, God, you are just so good. Thank you for who you are and what you've allowed me to be a part of. And I just rehearse things that I know are true about God's character. I'm telling you, that has done more to form who I am than any 1,000 persons of comments. And maybe some of you right now, you're living your life exhausted, trying to form your identity off of what everybody else around you thinks of you. And you're doing it in how you work hard, or you're doing it in what you post and what you hide and don't let people see, or you're doing it in a myriad of any other way that we all do. And I just hope what you will do this week is realize you don't have to figure out who you are anymore, and it doesn't matter who anybody next to you thinks you are. You were made by the eternal God to be eternally loved, and he has an identity for you, and you will discover it the more you discover him and the more you pursue him. So Ridge Point, go this week and pursue the eternal God of creation, whose name is Jesus, who loves you and who knows you and who will teach you to know yourself. God, take us into this week with your power, your grace, your glory all around us, to your name's end and to our benefit. Jesus, amen. If we can pray for you as you walk out this morning, we got a couple people, the team that we're down here and in the balcony, and would love to do that as you go into your week. Otherwise, Ridge Point, have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.